Hey there everybody. In this video we are going to see a couple of things. First and foremost, we are going to see the kind of impact it is that CSS has on the overall look and feel of any given web page. What we won't do in this particular exercise, but what I can guarantee you is if you kind of like mentally extrapolate, right? You just take what we are doing to one web page, you can essentially superimpose that to the idea of this is what happens on any web site, where we would be able to actually have the same style input that we would with just one individual page. So over here, I have brackets up and running. That's right here in the left-hand side of your window. You will notice that in the left pane, I have page1.html. And you will also notice that in that page1.html, there's very, very little going on here. All I have is HTML. I have a head section, and inside of that head section, I have the title and the character set. And I have the body and the /HTML. Nothing particularly noteworthy happening here yet. You'll also notice that over here in the right-hand pane, I have a file that I've started that has nothing in it that is called style.css. For the time being, these two files are actually not connected. They happen both to live on the desktop here of my Mac, but aside from that, they're actually not connected. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and add some content to what we're seeing over here in page 1, but we won't add too much content there. So we're going to add some content to page 1, and we're going to see what we can do in the way of CSS that's going to have an impact there. So here inside of body, remember, if you want material to be shown to the user, the tag we're going to put that in is the body. For the most part, body is the tag we use to deliver content to the user. So what I'm going to add here is a simple header. Remember, a header is just like the big marquee content that we would put on any particular page. And inside of that header, I just have an H1, a large header again. That's what the H stands for. I apologize for the repetition between header and header. It's just that literally they kind of mean the same thing. That this is our example page. So that's a piece of text we would expect to see on our page. Over here in the far extreme right of our window, this is the live demo. And one more time, the live demo is the live preview, rather, from brackets. Over here in the upper right-hand corner of brackets is the lightning bolt. So long as you have Chrome installed on your machines, hitting that lightning bolt while your cursor is, this is the part they don't tell you, while your cursor is here in the HTML document. Once you hit that live preview and save anything that's happening in here, that change is going to be immediately visible over here in your live preview. So what does that mean? With that live preview, if I add just a little bit more in the way of content. So essentially all I'm going to do here, and I should be preaching good design here. What we really want and what brackets will actually do for you is maintain some indentation. So this body tag is going to have one set of indents inside of it. So essentially one tab space over to the right from the extreme left hand of the page. And all of these things are going to belong to body. If you think of everything kind of nested together like essentially in an unordered list, or a set of bullet points, right, for an outline that you're putting together for an English paper. Those indentation rules if you follow those here, you're going to be able to follow along with the outline that is your HTML document, just in the same way that you'd be able to follow along with your outline for an English paper, for example. So here, all I've added is an H1, an H2, and an H3. I'll show you exactly how I did that. I simply took one of my lines of text. This is an H1, this is an H2, this is an H3. It really doesn't matter. I copied that line and I paste it. Where if I hold Shift and Tab, it's going to move whatever line my cursor is in to be in line with wherever the previous line is. Once I have that, I simply change the 3 to a 4 in the tag. I come back in here to the text and I change that to a 4 as well. So this way I have an H1, an H2, an H3, and an H4. I can refer to them by line number, 14, 15, 16, 17. And if I was to save this, so if you are following along on a Mac, it's Command S. If you are following along on a PC, it's Control S. S is for save. So Command S. Over here, I'm not sure if you noticed it, but to the extreme right of our page, right here, you can see H1 peeking through. So this is an H1, this is an H2, this is an H3, itty bitty H4. All I had to do was save whatever new content I put over here in my HTML, and those changes are affected immediately over here in my live preview. So we've got a couple of pieces of text there. We'll add a couple more of the tags that you have seen here in chapters 2 and chapter 4. So I am cheating a little bit. I will tell you that much is true, by copying and pasting this from another document just so that you don't have to wait for my horrible, atrocious typing. So here on line 19, I have a short paragraph. This is a paragraph. Here on line 21, you'll notice this little black space in between 21 and 22. That's because brackets knows if you have a line that goes too long to fit in one space, it's going to give to you as much space as you need to make that line fit without changing the line numbers. Remember that in ahref, this is an anchor reference, hyperlink reference. An anchor reference, goes to another web page. Here I have inside of my href equals, I have rockvalleycollege.edu and target equals blank. That will open my web page in a new tab as opposed to replacing the web page that I'm on with that content. It's a very good idea to use this target equals blank, and I'm going to type through an example here immediately. It's a good idea to use that target equals underscore blank, because otherwise what you're having your unknown potential future client do is navigate away from your site. That's not what we're here for. We are here to trap the user in our particular property, right? So what we want is these anchors. So and you'll notice already, ahref, it's going to fill out for me the equals and the quotation marks there. Now, inside of the quotation marks is whatever I want to link to. I can link to and you can see it here, I can link to a GIF, I can link to a document, I can link to a PNG. This is a portable network graphic, and we'll talk about these later on. And I just want to go to a web page. So I'm going to go, because I mentioned all the time, to yahoo.com, and I'm coming outside of that quotation marks. So I just, came to the outside, like by hitting the right arrow key and hit space. And now, if I say target equals, and it's going to fill in for me blank. So that way, when my unknown potential future client goes ahead and clicks on this, it's going to open a new window instead. So I'll say Yahoo right here, and away we go. So now what we have is an anchor that's going to go to a new empty web page, and it's going to be Yahoo. We do want a little bit more content here just so we can change it with some style in the CSS, but not too much more because I'm running out of space at the bottom of my screen. I'm going to add for this an unordered list. So an unordered list, remember, is just a bulleted list. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Inside of that unordered list, each one of these LI, that's a list item, each one of those list items becomes a bullet point. Now, does it matter how many we have here? No, it absolutely does not. The web page is going to maintain how many of these are for you. So in it, the page, so because of Chrome, so because of Safari, because of Firefox, heaven forbid because of Edge, the browser is going to group these list items here and here and here with this unordered list because we are nesting those tags. This is the outside tag, and these, which I'm going to do this to, is the nested tag. So this unordered list, and just like with our example from previous, with our outline, we would indent here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Now what I'm going to do is save. So I'm a keyboard kind of guy. I'm going to say Command S. Over here on the extreme right, you can already see we have some action happening there. Remember, if you are on a PC, it's not Command S for save, it's Control rather S for save. So I come back over here to our extremely bookish and boring web page, right? So the content is here. This is an H1, this is an H2, this is an H3, etc. We have a paragraph, we have links, we have an unordered list with some list items. But what are we missing? We're missing style. The whole purpose to having a web page is to entice our users with the kinds of style we have, the way the page actually looks. So how are we going to do that? We are going to do that by connecting our style.css to our page1. HTML. So what are we going to do in order to do that? We need a link reference. So the link goes way up here inside of your head section. Here, I'm going to link href. That is remember, it's a hypertext reference. So it's an external web page that we're connecting to. Like I had mentioned in the previous podcast, a CSS is like turbocharging for HTML. It is penicillin, it is sliced bread, it is the greatest thing. So really, they don't operate independently of one another. So style.css and the rel, so that's the relative for the link, so that means the browser is going to ask a question, yo, what kind of document is this? And it's going to say, oh, I got it. It's a style sheet. So once I include this, what I am able to do is connect this document over here, my HTML, to this currently blank document over here, and that's my style.css. So what we're going to want to do is to add a little bit of style to it. So how do we do that? There is a little bit of a difference in the way that HTML, the syntax for HTML looks and the syntax for CSS. Here on the CSS, so our right-hand most brackets window, we don't need to declare a doc type. We don't need to declare a language it's in. We simply need to essentially start putting our style elements together. So here, the first one that we can essentially inside of our content manage is the body. Remember that here with CSS, we show what all belongs together. So our selectors and any properties and values we would have are inside of the curly brackets. The curly brackets are immediately to the right of P. and you will have to hold down the shift to get those. Otherwise, you get what are known as square brackets. Square brackets and curly brackets are not the same thing. You are indeed looking for curly brackets. Now, there's a couple of different ways that are all perfectly okay and perfectly functional, but may have an increase to your learning curve for how a CSS works. These curly brackets right here can either be all on the same line, which is sloppy and it makes your life hard. They can be like this, where we have the opening and the closing rather curly brackets on the opening for our selector, so body or H1 or H2, etc. Or you have yet another option, and that would be to do this. You would have the opening and the closing curly bracket on the same vertical line, and they would be immediately underneath, and for however many lines it is that they require, they would be immediately underneath the name of the selector. I suggest to you that this is absolutely the way you want to go. Here in Chapter 4, many of your selectors are going to have a one-line property and value declaration, and that won't be a big deal. But as we progress through the chapters, and actually quickly as we progress through the chapters, already Chapter 5 and especially Chapter 6 and 7, you are going to see multiple lines of style declarations with each one of these selectors. So just as more practice, how's that going to look? We're going to want to do an H1. We're going to want to do in H2. We are going to want to do in H3. I am actually going to actively ignore the fact that we have an H4. I'm going to leave it unstylized. We're going to have paragraph. I'm doing this on purpose. Capital P here on line 12 and lowercase p here on line 20. And what we're going to do is see whether or not there's a difference there. We have ahref. That's something else we can add style to. We also have ul. And again, I'm doing this on purpose. This is uppercase ul here and uppercase ul here. That seems like that's the same. The next line we have is list items, uppercase li here, lowercase li here. We'll see if there's a difference. And finally, we're going to leave that be. So this possible, this is possible. All three of these from lines 10 all the way up, those are good ways to have your style declarations. But please, please heed my words. Do them this way, where you have, I'm missing one now, where you have, oh, let me just demonstrate on that. I accidentally overwrote one of the closing curly brackets. And what you can see here is it highlights, brackets highlights for you, the fact that H3, paragraph, anchor, unordered list, and list item, something's wrong here. Usually when you see this big breach worth of red, it means you have forgotten to close a tag. Either you have forgotten to close a curly bracket here in your CSS or over here in the middle window. If I forget to close a paragraph, you can see what happens here and here. That means I forgot a closing tag someplace. And as soon as I replace that, that goes back. So I'm going to add that curly bracket back here, the curly brace rather back here. We're going to add these spaces here and hopefully not take up too much space. Perfect. So that you can still see what's going on here. So here we have the beginnings of my style.css. And remember, when we're done, the properties and values, so the things it is that we change here in style.css are going to have an impact on how page1.html, this HTML document here, is going to look and feel and operate. So now that we have our CSS kind of set up for us, so we have, just as a demonstration again, we have the selectors that we are going to use. So those selectors again are body, H1, H2, H3, paragraph, P, ahref, that is anchors, unordered list, and list items. What we want to do is start to adhere some style to this page. So just in order to kind of focus as we're going through on only the elements that we're working with presently, I'm going to get rid of all of that typing we have just done. The reason I want to do that is to demonstrate that brackets actually helps maintain the overall look of everything for us, so that we can, the overall function of everything for us, so that we can actually get to the business of applying style without necessarily having to type everything out as we go along. So what we want to do here is apply some style. So we want to apply some style to the background of the body. So this is background. So all I have to do is start typing back, and you'll notice I get a drop-down list here. If I use my mouse, I can go mouse around, but what I'll tell you is moving your hand from the keyboard to the mouse. Now, please stick with me. I understand how stupid this sounds at first blush. Moving your hand from the keyboard to the mouse uses a lot of time, right? So when you move your hand, you have to kind of come back and reestablish home row. You have to kind of visually get yourself back there, unless you are like a professional typist by trade, and that's fine too. Using the up and down keys actually uses less time. So background color. Once I hit enter on background color, boom, we get a list. Now what I will tell you is, here in this example, I am going to use the color values that are given to me by the drop-down box. But in future examples, and quite frankly, when you are developing web pages, you are going to use hexadecimal, or you are going to use RGB. You're going to use an exact color. These are actually exact. Every browser has 256 basic colors baked into it, and brackets actually gives you access to all of them. If I was just to scroll down, there's a ton of them. These are just the first several letters worth, so down through F, so fire brick, evidently. So what I'm going to do is find a color, dark slate gray. It is fairly inoffensive, I'm hoping, and it's going to have an immediate impact. So before I go do anything, cast your eyes over here on the far right-hand side of the page, and see we've got a white background, and as soon as I say Command S, nothing. That's because with CSS changes, sometimes the live preview is going to have you refresh the page. And this time around, it didn't. And that also happens once in a while. This is perfect timing. The reason that happened is because our live preview, has for whatever reason become disconnected from our brackets window. This happens, I'm not going to say all the time, but this happens as a result of Chrome going through and doing what's called memory cleanup. It goes through and says, holy cats, I've been using a ton of space. Let's make this better. And sometimes it simply disconnects from over here. So what I'm going to do is click this live preview button, and that's going to go disconnect the HTML from over here. I'm going to click that live preview button again, and it's not going to work. And why doesn't it work? Because my mouse cursor was over here in style.css, and it needed to be over here in page1.html. So just remember, when you get that error message, something like open an HTML file or make sure there is an index.html in your project folder. That means you weren't over here opening a live preview for an HTML document. And as soon as this goes through, what I expected to see here was a dark or a slate gray background, but maybe it is. So if you look between these two, not a lot of change. And if I come back over here, This is all part of the plan, guys. Don't worry. What I want to do is troubleshoot. I want to find out why isn't my background color turning into a dark slate gray. So if I hover over here, you can kind of see what that dark slate gray is supposed to look like. This happens. Now, what I want to do is what's called comment out the code. I want this particular line, or even potentially a series of lines, not to have an impact on how the CSS or the page is being styled. Very simple. On a Mac, it's command /, and on a PC, it's control /. What this is going to do is add a comment. This is what a comment looks like. So over here on the left-hand side, it is /* as many lines or as many selectors or selectors and properties and values as it's going to take. And then over here, */. So /*// and everything else in between becomes commented. Even easier is you can select a line or a range of lines in brackets and say command or control /, and it's going to go ahead and toggle through commented and commented out. So I'm going to come back through here and comment out frankly, all of the body. So here's my comment line on 1, here's my comment line on 6, and that means none of this is having any impact. I'm going to save this document, and over here you can see it hasn't had any real impact yet on how our page1.html looks. So what's happening? The thing that's happening here is that I didn't remember to save over here in my page1.html. I pasted in this line, link href style CSS rel style sheet. I pasted this line in, and then I came over here to style.css, and I didn't remember to save. So that's what I'm going to do here is Command S. I'm saving here. Over here on the style.css, I'm going to remove this particular comment, and almost immediately we notice over here in our live preview that boom, we get the dark slate gray background that I expected. Now, if you look over here on the CSS demo page, we have this, I'm going to call it a blue rectangle around a portion of the screen, and that is going to be immediately potentially disconcerting to some of you. Actually, what I can tell you is this is pretty great. What brackets is doing is highlighting the tag or the property that I'm in, or the selector rather that I'm in. So over here in style.css, if I click on any blank line, you'll notice over here on the right-hand pane, nothing is happening. But if I click on line number 1, immediately we see this color change over here. So I'm going to click away, and if you just cast your eyes over here to the right-hand side, I'm going to click in line 1, and boom, we see that subtle blue highlighting happening. If over here in my page1.html, if I click in H1, we should expect to see some changes over there. So let's do that. Let's come over here and let's add an H1 selector. You'll notice I don't even have so much as a property and value in here yet to change, but if I look over here on the right-hand side of the page, I have those blue highlights around the H1s that I have, which is here inside of my header, and which is here on line 15. So over here, over here is the style.css. If I click on any selector, it brackets and the live preview, it is going to highlight that area for you, which is fantastic. So what we're going to want to do is add some more style here so that the impact of the page we have developed here can be seen here in our actual web page. So what are some things that we've seen already that we can add. Let's do another background color for H1, and this time I'm going to make it Alice blue. I want it to really stick out horribly. Please don't mistake this rather for good design. This is bad design, but good examples. Let's make the background color Alice blue, and as soon as I hit enter, you noticed over here in the far right hand side that the background of my two H1s turned white-ish. Really, that color is Alice blue. Now, I want to change the foreground color, the color that the words are here. So this would be called another, what? Property in value. So this is color, and this time let's pick something that's going to stand out. And again, this is not good design, this is terrible design, but it is good demonstration. Let's try blue-violet. So as soon as I hit enter on blue-violet, you'll notice over here I get that purpley color. So with these two properties and values here inside of this H1 selector, we have made this piece of eyeball violence happen. One thing to note here is the text is absolutely correct on page 113. It tells you, 114 rather, it tells you that one of the three ways that you are able to actually functionally code inside of your selectors and your declarations is on this very last, so it's called the trailing property and value. It's okay, technically speaking, it's okay to not include this trailing semicolon. But what I will tell you is always include the trailing semicolon. Later on, it's entirely probable, not just possible, but probable, that you are going to come back here into the CSS, and what you are going to do is add more properties and values. So rather than bet on yourself remembering down the road, don't. Make a little investment and always include that trailing semicolon, so that no matter who the next developer in the chain is, no matter how long it is in between now and whenever it is that you can come back and actually do some changes here, include that trailing semicolon so that you don't have to worry about what's happening later on to go back and edit to find out what's happened. So I'm just going to paste in here two more visual assaults. An H2 color change. Remember that color is the text, background color is what's happening behind the text. And oops, that's this one, H2. H3, fuchsia and background color aqua. And you can see that is this horrible abomination happening right here. We can keep doing this. Hopefully at some point in time in the future we'll be able to use good design, but for the time being we will have bad design because it's very descriptive of what's happening here. Let's go down to add unordered list. So again, I am using unordered list in caps here, and let's trade that around. I will use UL, unordered list, here as lowercase and here as uppercase. Unordered list, H3, H2, H1, body, anchor references, paragraph, everything else that you have seen so far are part of the core components of HTML. That means they are the foundational building blocks that every user has access to. Later on down the line, we will see that there really truly is a difference between, potentially there is a difference between a capital UL and a lowercase UL. It is my suggestion to you that if you are not going to capitalize everything, don't capitalize anything. So that means here in my HTML, I've got H1, H2, H3, H4, and all of these are lowercase. Over here on line 26, I have a UL and it's uppercase. Don't. Just, if you're not going to capitalize everything, don't capitalize anything. So I'm going to come back through here and change my list items to lowercase, etc. Once upon a time, this would have broken a fundamental and cardinal rule in HTML. Before we had developers' environments, we had to do everything visually. When we had to do everything visually as far as troubleshooting goes, it was far easier for your eye to track to uppercase letters than it was to dig for a tag someplace in lowercase letters. And so the rule book was built around your tags shall always be uppercase. But now that we have developers' environments, just stick to the rule of thumb that if you're not going to capitalize everything, don't capitalize anything. And that way, down the road, you will not come into the issue where you'll have an unordered list as capitalized and an unordered list lowercase, which in fact are not, or potentially not, the same thing. So what we want to do is add some style to our unordered list. We don't want to go completely crazy. We just want to add just a little bit here. So I'm going to come in here and paste a little bit of a color to our unordered list. And you can already see we had that change you could see here over on the right hand side. So something I want to point out here, something that you'll notice is here in my unordered list I have two properties and two values to set. The two properties are background color and color. So this is the foreground color. You'll notice over here in my HTML document I have my unordered list, and nested inside of that is my list items. That's these lines 27, 28, and 29. And over here you'll notice that the style I have for my unordered list has essentially trickled down to my list items. Now that's actually something you may want to change. So what I'm suggesting that we can do is we can have definitions for our list items that are different than what happens for our unordered list. Now what I'll do here is let's change something else. Certainly we could change the color, certainly we could change other things, but to give them a more impact statement on what it is that CSS can do, let's change the font. Font is, as I'm sure you're aware, the way it is that text is seen. Font itself is usually not the property that you want to change. Font style is usually one of the things you want to change. So italic, normal, oblique, etc. Font, let's say we do want to change font. Let's just get rid of that and start over. Font, we have to pick something by name. Now, this gets to be tricky because it's very, very difficult for you to say for sure what the unknown potential future user's machine is going to be able to display. Are they on a Windows machine? There's only a small cache of fonts included. Have they installed Word? That's a bigger font cache that gets installed. Have they installed the Adobe Creative Suite or pieces thereof? You could potentially have a far greater font cache then. What we don't want is to change the font. What we want is to change the font family. This one is font family, the third one down. Cursive, fantasy, inherit, monospace, serif, and sans serif. Essentially, I'm not sure if this is true, but prove me wrong, is that serif is Greek for feet. So a serif font has feet on it. A sans serif font does not. So let's do this. Let's do font family sans serif. I'm going to save this and come over here so we can see what the difference is. I'm going to make that a little bigger so it's easier to see. You'll notice that 1, 2, and 3 here in our list items are sans serif. So that means we have removed their feet. My 3-year-old would be terribly upset with us if we remove the feet on anything. And you'll notice 1, 2, 3, there's no little feet there. If we come up to the unordered list where it says this is an unordered list, you can see the edges of the T has little embellishments on it. The bottom of the T has embellishments. The two bottom portions of the H, the I, the S has two vertical embellishments on it. Once upon a time, there was a tremendous argument, and there still is, frankly, there's still a tremendous argument between schools of thought. One school of thought says that in large blocks of text, so if you think about things like newspapers, if you think about things like encyclopedias, etc., that the serif helps your eye track. So tracking is what your eye can do from left to right, from top to bottom. And the theory was that your eye could track more easily if it had these little serifs on there because it gave a horizontal and a vertical checkpoint. Another just as fervent camp says the opposite. Your eye can go up, down, left, and right all on its own, and we do not need to provide for you the little feet. I suggest to you, whatever, pick 1 or 2 fonts, pick 1 or 2 font families, and just stick with it. So if you're going to have all of your headings be serif fonts and all of whatever the balance of the text is be sans serif fonts, that's fine. Just pick a nomenclature and stick with it. You don't have to go completely and totally crazy in order to get the attention of your unknown potential future clients. As a matter of fact, it's really better if you don't. Next, we're going to change just a couple of things so we can see a few more of the benefits to CSS. So here inside of list item, let's also do font size. So font size is exactly what it sounds like. It is how big the font is going to display on a page. For the time being, we are going to use point, PT. The point of a font is 1/72 of an inch. What I'll tell you is this harkens back to the print days. We needed a way to make sure that one printing press could, share a document with another printing press, and they would both look exactly the same way. So for every inch, they divided that inch into 72 dots. Each one of those dots is a point. So you are accustomed to 12-point font, right? So that's here on line 25, 12-point font. 12-point font is what you use when you just go into a Word document and start typing. Probably what you're also familiar with is changing that to 14-point font, right? I have been told by an instructor that I need a 3-page paper. So what do? I make the font just a little bit bigger. So over here we can see 1, 2, and 3 is in fact larger than it was over here. I'm going to move this just a little bit further over so you can really see. If I comment out line 25, again, comment on a PC is Control / and on a Mac it's Command /. As soon as I do that, and you look over on the right-hand side, you can see the immediate difference that font size line has. Commented out, it's not 14-point font. Commented in, it is 14-point font. So when you're testing, if something has gone terribly wrong, this H3, I would suggest to you, is terribly wrong. The fuchsia color, the aqua background, I have done permanent damage to your psyche very probably. Click anywhere inside line 13. I'm over here between the O and the R in color. Command or Control /, boom, and we get a much more normal H3, and it's no longer causing me to become nauseous and lose consciousness. other things I do want to show you here, the very last thing, as a matter of fact, I do want to show you here, is the idea of a descendant selector. So over here on our HTML, you'll notice I have a header, and inside of header is nested H1. So this H1 right here is, for the time being, taking its style cues from this H1 over here, right? So Alice blue with a blue-violet color. We look over here, Alice blue background, blue-violet color. Alice blue background, blue-violet color. But that's not necessarily what we wanted. We nested over here in our HTML document, we nested H1 inside of header. So that means probably what we wanted to do was have a different style than the rest of the H1s on the page. So we can actually do that. So back over here in style.css, I'm going to create a header H1 selector. And in that, I'm going to change some of its property and values. Let's just select something real easy, font family, cursive. And over here, very, very quickly, we can see that the font family has changed so that only our header H1, so that's over here, our header H1, only the header H1 has cursive, whereas the regular H1 has whatever the standard Chrome font is here. This is what is known as descendant selector. So here is our selector, is really header. And from header, the thing it is that I'm going to change is H1. We can actually take this example and go a little bit further. If I put a paragraph in here inside of my header, my shift key just went out on me. Good, good, good. There we go. Well, no keyboard lasts forever, right? So if I'm going to put a paragraph over here inside of H1, and I'm just going to say something cheesy like this is a paragraph. Just like so. Remember, you'll notice I didn't see any change over here in my HTML. That's because I didn't save it. So I'm going to save this document. And right here, I see this is a paragraph inside of my header. And over here, I have this is a paragraph inside of my, just the regular body of my text. And I can see that right here. So you'll notice between, and I'm just going to call them by their line numbers, 21 and 13. Over here, line 21 has a black color, so that's the font color is black. Over here, line number 13 has a black color as well. And if I want to change one or the other, I can either change here inside of just my CSS. If I wanted to change the body paragraph, I could do that here. So I'm just going to, so I started on line 22, I said P for paragraph, I hit enter, and I hit the opening curly bracket, and then boom, I get the closing one. I hit enter to move that a line down. So to be as descriptive as possible here, I'm going to say color, something that's going to stand out, azure. You'll notice over here that line 13 and line 21, both of them turned azure, is almost white. So that's fine, right? As long as every paragraph on the page wants to change. But again, over here in the HTML, I clearly have a header section, which means that I want things that are nested inside of that section potentially to act a little bit differently. So what are we going to do? Right down here, I'm going to have a header paragraph. And inside that header paragraph, I'm going to change the color to something abysmal so we can really see it, crimson. And instantly we can see crimson happens up there. Remember, if I want to add more than one property and value, I simply have to separate those with a semicolon. And actually, I'm going to separate those both with, and we can see that here on line 40, a semicolon and a new line. So I'm going to change the font family to, let's do fantasy, because it's a little bit different than cursive is. So you can see that here. And I am also going to change the font size to something much bigger. We'll go 20 point instead. So right here already we can see that we've got a difference, right? Here, this is line 21, is being stylized by this paragraph selector. This line 13 is being stylized by this header P. So this is a descendant selector. Header is essentially the parent, right? So that's the big grouping that I want to refer to. And then P is paragraph, the descendant. So that means that it is taking its cues from the header section. What I am going to do is include both of these files in their completed form right under this video. So it's something you can type along with. In total, there are fewer than 80 lines of code happening here. But just in case something has gone terrifically awry on your side, you're going to see both of these. So this is the start that you will have with CSS. What CSS, a style sheet, is able to do is in very, very short order. So again, this is over here in the middle pane. With a selector and a property and a value, it is able to change in little ways or change in dramatic ways the way it is that a simple HTML page is being displayed by your browser. So that is CSS in a nutshell.